Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Me too.
Well, let me call the General Plan Update Task Force meeting to order. And I will begin with roll call. Jill Hoffman,
Present.
Ray Whitty,
Yes, I'm here.
Bill Werner,
Yes.
and John McCoy.
Present.
And I should just indicate that this is Tuesday, April 26, 2016. It's 5 p.m. And also present is myself, Danny Castro, Lily Whalen, our city clerk, assistant city manager, and Mary Wagner is not present. Item number 2, public comments on items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? I'm hearing none. We go to item number 3, draft request for proposals, RFP, for general plan consultant. And it's to review the draft RFP for the general plan consultant and recommend to the city council to authorize staff to seek bids. Let me begin with just giving you background. At our last meeting, we had discussed general concepts with the approach to the general plan update. Initially, we were looking at approaching the circulation element first, and then there was discussion regarding other important elements that are very related to circulation, and again, just a comprehensive look at the general plan update. What we decided was that we were, it was important to look at a draft scope of work, and you directed me to prepare a draft scope of work, and I did that in the form of an RFP, a request for proposal. When I looked at doing a scope of work, oftentimes it's at this point very fluid because it's not intended, so what you have in front of you to me is not intended to be a final draft, because it is something that can certainly be modified, added to, removed in terms of where our approach is. And certainly once we also begin the process, the scope of work will certainly be modified and amended. So I think this is a good starting point. I approached this RFP to provide what I thought were the bare bones of what a general plan update entails. There are certainly many ways we can approach a general plan update, and what I did was provide the basics, and we can fill in or remove items. I looked at both an approach to do, I'm careful to use a sort of comprehensive general plan update, only because I think there's wording in my RFP, in this RFP, that says strategic. But I also think that when I say comprehensive, is that we would be, that approach would be taking the entirety of the general plan in all elements, while there still is an order to how we want to approach and what we want to take on each element. It's the commitment to do an entire general plan update. There's also an option and a request for prospective applicants to provide us what it would do, to do an element by element approach and what those costs would be. I did some research on that and talked to some of my other colleagues in other cities that have done that. And I have some comments on that, and I'll reserve that for a little bit later. But I also think that if we were to do a comprehensive general plan update, a comprehensive one, my suggestion and recommendation in this RFP is that it be under 3 years. I provided a proposed range of costs that would be in that. It doesn't set in stone, and it really leaves up to the consultant to give their estimate of cost. My suggestion is that we open for some general discussion amongst the committee, and then perhaps if we'd like, we can go page by page, or however we want to approach looking at this RFP. What I hope to get from you is some direction. Either we have enough direction tonight that I'm able to make amendments and then take this, perhaps this draft, and report to the city council. Whether it's taking the draft of the RFP, I'm not sure if the city council wants to see a draft RFP, or to give some general sense of what the committee's recommendations are, this task force recommendations are, in moving forward. I should say too that this is an RFP process. It's not a commitment necessarily to do a general plan update. I know that that entails approval of a budget process, but this at least gets us moving forward, and I think that's all I have to say right now. Do you have any general comments? Did you all have a chance to review?
I flipped through it real quick. Can I may have missed this, but on the call to order on the agenda, it says that Mary's, does it say Mary's present or that she's?
Mary is not present today.
I don't know, let me get input. I'd like input
Sure.
from Bill. You've been through this, right?
Mm.
I've never done an update. John, have you done an update to general
No.
plan? Adam? You have, okay, right? No.
And I've done one, and
You-
I
yeah,
have to share,
yeah, yeah.
But I mean, yeah,
If I may
Yeah.
comment, I just have a question,
sure.
whether the committee would like to discuss the 3-year time span or shoot for 30 months and not 36 months, and allow for potential diversion or hiccups or whatever, and accept the idea of possibly taking 3 years, but aim for a shorter period of time, because public participation wears itself out after a certain time, and it's difficult to maintain the same intensity of work for 3 years.
So what do you-
No question about that. I have a more general question,
Mm-hmm.
and I've shared this with Danny.
Yeah.
And that is whether we should really be looking at an RFP or an RFQ. Should we be looking for a request for qualifications first, so that in fact we get reasonable and thoughtful submissions from potential consultants in advance of them having to sit down and put numbers to it, so that we can then, and hopefully there will be a citizens advisory group involved with staff and with elected officials, that will be able to sit down and interview those potential consultants from that have responded to a request for qualifications, which would be done to a much shorter scope of work. In other words, we would be, I can get into that a little bit more, but it seemed to me anyway that this scope of work essentially restricted and biased the possible value of the consultants. In other words, it didn't give them a chance to help us understand what it means to do a general plan 20 years after we did the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
make
that's-
sense? I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of where when I first looked at this and I went through and came across some things, I'll tell you what I wrote down for Danny. I mean, basically, why is it an RFP rather than RFQ? And then my second one was, there's a line on the page that said the team, namely whoever consultants are, will work under the direction of the city staff. Question then right away is, where's the general plan steering committee? Where's the citizens advisory committee? Where are the elected officials in this direction part of it with the consultant? The second one, or the third point that was made in here, and this is a strong bias on my part, clearly, and I will accept all the slings and arrows for it, but the consultation with other regulatory agencies, I should be I would be really cautious about how that is handled, because, I mean, there are those that see ABAG and Bay Area, one Bay Area plan, and all the rest of those as simply hostile armies waiting to take over the town. So I think we should be aware of that fact, and we should be dealing with our consultants also from that point of view, that you know, we're a town that's not necessarily gonna sit here and roll over every time somebody up in Sacramento says, we're gonna save the earth. I mean, there's plenty of evidence that is beginning to prove that there are some things that are being done in the name of you know, sustainability and so on and so forth, which are getting the opposite result. So we got to be careful about that. The other little point within this is that the outside consulting analysis, and this is something that we would need to deal with the potential consultants that are the lead consultant. But the other consulting issues that have to do with CEQA, there'll be hydrology people, there'll be wildlife people, there'll be all the rest of these little pockets and so on. Not for a change, but it seems to me that those kinds of analyses from those consultants ought to be done in parallel with the work that we're doing, so that in fact they inform the result of the general plan rather than justify it, which is what most CEQA work ends up being. I think that there's value. When I said that the complete streets ignore the wildlife path, I'm serious about that. And then finally, I think that if we did go for a request for qualification, then I think we should sort of reanalyze these concepts and maybe define them, maybe reduce the number, but make them really clear, and then in the request for qualifications, ask potential lead consultants to opine or comment on those things that we now think are important. Anyway, that's kind of where
Help me understand what is the actual practical difference between an RFQ and an RFP in terms of what you get back? Because I like the idea of, you know, using the consultants more to to help us formulate where we need to go more. I like that idea. So
practical difference from the consultant point of view, the way I would look at it, is that the RFP ends up really being a pricing document, and is treated that way, no matter how much we wish to say we are going to base it on qualifications and this, that, and the other thing. You know, the dollar amounts end up being the thing that sways the decision as much as anything else. Certainly, I've been in situations where we've basically thrown out, you know, pretended we were Olympic diving judges, and we throw out the high mark and the low mark and work between the ones in the middle, you know. But an RFQ is addressed by the consultants in a different way.
Yeah.
They need to really dig into their own background, and then dig into our background. And again, it's what information do we give them? I mean, they all ought to get a copy of the 1995 general plan, and whatever else is germane to it, so that they can then address us from their reading and understanding of who the hell we are.
If I can add to that, Bill, my understanding of both, you know, sort of the practical difference between an RFQ and RFP is that it's sequential. You would do an RFQ, and you can just go right to an RFP, but you can do an RFQ, request for qualifications, to get the pool of prospective candidates out there. You know, you advertise out and you get that full range of these companies that do general plan, specialize in that. It enables us, the reviewers, to start to see what is it that we want from these, who specializes in what, and it also we have the ability to shortlist then from that larger pool of candidates, and it helps, you know, kind of further narrow what we want before we then go into that RFP, which can just be a pricing, but it also can provide information that is a bit to this, but it starts to narrow what we want. So
yeah, and it does give you the opportunity to restrict those who you ask for a proposal from to those that you actually want to work with.
yeah, and to me it's a two-step process in that just in terms of time, it could take a little bit, you know, a little longer in the bidding, well, not necessarily the bidding, but in the selection process.
The other side of it is that it's my view anyway, that the RFQ will in fact inform us as to, you know, our own view of what we're doing before we then go out for a full-fledged proposal from the three that we like, or whatever turns out.
And oftentimes the interview process, if we decide, you know, if we build in an interview process even in the RFQ stage, is that it educates us, you know.
Yeah.
While I've done one before and we all have experience in various manners in the general plan, I may get insight on perhaps a new way and a new approach to doing a general plan update that what these specialists do is they stay up on the latest.
That's right.
And they could provide us perhaps ways to be more effective.
May I ask a question? I think, if I interpret Bill's idea correctly, are we trying to outsource the general plan, or are we trying to hire expertise to help us create the general plan? In other words, where's the net transfer of intellectual property at the end of the day? Are we going to invest in putting a lot of our knowledge into a third-party consultant who will disappear in 3 years, unless we want to bring them back and pay them some more money in exchange for documents on a shelf? Or are we hiring the expertise which will inform our own staff and increase the intellectual capital inside our own staff and our own expertise? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
who's responsible for delivering this? I think that's the difference between the request for qualifications and the request for proposal.
Well, this is, you know, I can't emphasize enough that this has to be completely vetted with public outreach, community input on this. You know, the shaping of this general plan is a series of meetings that reach out to the community and say, what do you want, what do you don't want? Let's help form what these policies are looking forward. And the thing about the technical, you know, a consultant is going to provide the technical expertise that's necessary to get through our CEQA requirements, meeting state requirements that general plans now must comply with. The rules have gotten more, have increased from 1995. We have a lot more regulatory things that we have to comply with, and they'll make sure we're doing that correctly.
But at the end of the day, who's responsible for delivering the document? The consultant?
That consultant will deliver the document.
So
I
we're
mean, I think
buying, we're buying a plan.
No, we're not buying a plan. Now that's, you're really wrong about that.
Okay.
We're buying someone to guide us through the process of arriving at our plan, but doing it within a framework that is pretty much set in, I mean, you know, we have to do these 5 or 6
7
elements, period, you know, and we have to have CEQA backup analyses for each of them and so on. None of us in this room and none of us on staff has the ability to do any of that stuff individually or even as a group. And so therefore, you know, these are like guides through the forest, the consultant. They know where the bad guys are. They know where the holes in the ground are and so on and so forth. And essentially, I see the consultant the prime consultant being our guide and also our contact to the other necessary consultants to deal with the CEQA part of it.
And, you know,
And, well, I'm sorry, and one more major issue, which is why I think that the request for qualifications and the ability to meet and talk and understand these people so that we can be comfortable that whoever we choose is really gonna be able to work with the citizens of this town as well, because that's where they're gonna end up being, their feet are gonna be to the fire.
So let's take a step back for a second and ask a more fundamental question, because when we started this process, we were just gonna look at the circulation element. And then we had discussions, and then we decided, well, do we wanna do that, or do we need to look at it in the context more of the general plan, if we're gonna look at, can we parse out the circulation? And so then I think we came to the point where, well, we need to look at it holistically, but, you know, and I'm always looking at bottom line, right? So I wanna make sure that we're not creating, you know, unintentionally or unnecessarily a much bigger project than what we actually need. So, I mean, it's very, very costly, right? And so if we, you know, our general plan, from what I recall, is that it's, you know, it's outdated, it's 20 years old, but it needs a little bit of tweaking here and there, but it's not gonna have we're not envisioning it to be a substantial change, except maybe for the circulation part, maybe. But I just wanna be very clear, if we're doing an RFQ or an RFP, that we're not looking to be the full service employment for some consultant for the next 5 years. You know, it's a very lean and very purposeful.
Well, that's.
Well, I think
Right.
RFP takes the extra step that might help really delineate which firm is most appropriate for this city to do that.
Yeah, and, I mean, I just want to be very clear that that's, if we do when we get to the RFP point, that's, the scope is fairly narrow, I think.
sure.
So, to your,
Well,
to your John.
well, the scope should be what it needs to be.
That's right.
And I think the reason and why I'm sort of, if I'm understanding it, I could move towards seeing that an RFQ works, is that through that process, we might be able to formulate a bit better what it is that we need. Rather than put forth, now I'm getting it, rather than put forth something for a proposal where we're not even sure whether that's what we want.
Is there
Is
cost?
that what?
That's
is that
exactly,
what-
that's
is that what
exactly
you're
what I'm
getting
getting at with this too. And that is that, you know, we're gonna get some free advice.
Is that was my question,
Initial.
is there cost for an RFQ? Like,
Probably not.
no?
No, just time,
Staff time.
staff time, and whoever we decide that's gonna sit in conversations with potential candidates, you know, and get to learn what we wanna do, and you know, so we could vet that out a
I
little bit more.
mean, it is, from my way of thinking, and it has been in the past when I've been involved in these, it has been an educational process that really did inform the client, in my case, or whoever it was, of issues that needed to be addressed in the full-fledged proposal.
So you envision though issuing an RFP after the RFQ?
Yeah.
You know, you were saying that when we initially discussed the approach, and it was to do the circulation element, it was to do the circulation element as the first priority in doing a general plan update.
That's right, correct.
So it was to follow. And to give you a bit of background, you know, I did check with, there were some cities who had recently done an element by element approach. Their take though, and this is something I want to put out here, was that they weren't in a rush to do a general plan update. And they did an element by element based on their budgetary issues and saying, okay, we'll tackle this one, and in year 2, we'll tackle this, and you know what, year 4, we'll do another one. And what I found is that, you know, and that's certainly a way to do it, it does not, it doesn't save costs, in my opinion, and in my conversations, because each element would require environmental review if you're deciding you're gonna make that amendment to a general plan each time. which to me, you know, maybe others feel, in other cities feel, well, that's the way we want to parse it out, because we feel we just wanna handle it in bits and pieces. So that's certainly an approach, and quite honestly, it's something I would wanna hear more from a consultant as to, and that's why this suggests saying, tell us what it would mean to do either one, and give us your advice on that. I think I know what it is, but I don't know, certainly, you know, I haven't been through an element by element. I'm also just very concerned about spreading this process out for a long period of time. You get community fatigue, you know, Adam alluded to that. You get people involved, and you know, if you're telling them they can be, you know, have a steering committee involved for 5+ years, you're going to get burnout. You know, and you know, this idea that, you know, we've been at it for a long time now, let's get this thing done.
Yeah.
So often it's a hurry up, you know.
But
yeah.
I want to pick up on something that Russ made a point about, you know, it's, I don't want to put words in your mouth either, is, I know when it comes to, let's take the housing element as an example. That's a really bad, in one sense it's a really bad example, because, you know, the housing element's under a different set of, almost a different set of regulations, or a differently driving set of regulations in the other chapters. But I noticed there was a real danger, because that one was so heavily regulated and needed to get finished on a time frame. We were moving towards, with the aid of a consultant, with the aid of the, you know, the M group and the others, to actually produce a document that was finished that the state would approve, as opposed to necessarily something that was totally optimized for Sausalito. And that's not what we want with the general plan in general, right? We want general plan in general. We want the actual plan to be highly relevant to the needs that Sausalito has at the moment, rather than just a consultant coming in with the mindset of, you know, what does the state want?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yes.
that to me is the most important qualification that
Yeah.
you get down to, you know. So for instance, I believe, and I'm going to argue very strongly, and it's actually been part of our strategic plan, if you go look it up, that we have an economic fiscal element in the plan. Now, we technically have one, I think, in our current plan. Right. But, you know, there's been a lot of discussion prompted by Russ and some of his associates to ask the question, we need to be planning more carefully around the impact of tourism. You know, well, that's sort of general plan stuff, right? In the sense that if we want to decrease tourism, or we want to increase tourism, or we want to, whatever we want to do, there's going to have to be provided groups that, or someone who can help us with the technical analyses to actually say, you know, if you actually change this aspect of our businesses by zoning or by putting in policies because the community now wants it, what's the actual economic effect? And that's okay. We just need to know it. It doesn't mean we should be moving towards maximizing the economy or minimizing it, but we need to know quantitatively what it is. So to my mind, because you know this whole thing is going to be about parking, buses, parking lots, tourist bicycles, you know, among other things, right? As opposed to, we're not going to be changing the density of our residential neighborhoods, most likely not, right? So
Yes.
we need a consultant that's actually going to be attuned to the problems we need to solve for Sausalito, not the generic,
No.
general plan solutions, that's,
what I-
I'll shut up.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's what I meant when I said we need to have what I meant as a hostile disagreement,
Right.
outside influences.
Right, that's right,
So-
that's right.
Right. And, you know, I have to say, the challenge is doing it, I keep saying under 3 years. I really feel like it's the most efficient. I don't see it as a whole rewrite of this general plan. There are a lot of policies in the general plan that I believe are still relevant. Absolutely, I mean, we don't even have to touch them. However, you know, there's certainly subjects and policies I think we desperately need,
Right.
you know, and looking in the next 10 to 20 years.
And one of the other things, Jill, specifically about doing, I mean, I can't remember what the names of the elements are right off the top of my head right now, but, you know, there's land use. and so on.
Noise, land use.
One of the, and this addresses Adam's, well-taken comments about citizen involvement fatigue, and that is that, there will be, and it ought to be advertised as such, there will be a number of people who would be interested in each specific one of those things. And if we assign 5 or 6 people, or whatever the number may be, from the community, who, somebody wants to take care of hydrology, one wants to take care of land use, one wants to they're focused on that. And that's their baby for the next couple of years. As the process is going on and our consultants are building each of these things in some kind of relative symbiotic way of growing and being put together, then the citizens who are involved in this are working with what the original general plan was, and the background that is in there that came directly from citizens originally in 1995, you know, is sort of the groundwork or the history or the fiction or whatever you want to call it that set the vision. And each of them can continue along those lines, and we can keep people involved, rather than having everybody, you know, jump up at some big meeting every once in a while and spout their venom.
Yeah, I mean, we can have, you know, a variety of volunteer general plan community members that are, just as Bill says, assigned
Right.
to various subjects to kind of shepherd it along and then represent.
But I would also suggest, unlike the Imagine Sausalito stuff, where in fact, a lot of those groups were in fact only self-selected volunteers.
Right.
It is really important that these people come out of appointment through the council.
And even so too, I think there needs to be a core steering committee that is in it for the long run.
That's right. In a way, that's the way the public safety building thing was organized. You know, there were people involved with the site selection, the needs assessment, the this, the that, and so on and so forth. But then there were 2 or 3 people that were kind of, 3 or 4, I guess, that were in fact the steering committee, and they had their little groups out there doing their stuff. And that worked.
So what are you trying to get, I mean, we're trying to get in front of the city council, right?
I would like to get from the city council, you know, I would like to, I think this is, you know, understanding, what I'm hearing is that an RFQ would be an approach, I think, to begin the process initially so that we can get the best pool of prospective team available, and then be able to narrow and educate also ourselves throughout this project of canvassing out there who can help us. And then begin with an RFP process, you know. I think it'll help further define our scope of work too, and our approach. And we may have some new ideas about how we want to do this. A lot of times, you know, these consultants are going to look for direction. They're going to get sound bites from us. They're going to really try to understand us, you know, and they're gonna get mixed messages, and they're gonna have all of that, and that's their job to distill that, and, in the end, and that's what the steering committee job is, and staff's job is to bring them back and to steer them back into, no, you're going that, don't go that direction, come, reel it back in here, you know?
I think ultimately though, what the RFQ is gonna give you is it's gonna allow the consultants to project their own model and vision onto us.
And I like
That's
that.
what allows you to understand which one you wanna hire.
It gives them a more of an open slate,
Mhm.
you know, just see what's out there, and for us to go, you know, yeah.
It will give
But it
us,
probably adds 6 months to the process.
not necessarily,
Not quite.
I don't know, but it will give us a much clearer, vision of what would be in the request for proposal, is what it would really give.
I mean, you know, these companies are doing general plans left and right now.
Yeah.
You know, so they're savvy, you know, other communities are savvy, like us, and, you know, are saying the same things we are saying, but, you know, but each community is unique, and what we want is not what Vallejo wants, you know?
Right.
So how fundamentally, would you, would you change this document to turn it into
RFQ. I think I might generalize it a bit. I would give Sausalito's background and perhaps some approach to why we want to embark on a general plan update. But I would leave it a bit short from giving some of the detail that's in here.
How do you address Jill's concern about,
But I would give some, I would give some general themes of what has come to light more recently in the city.
Jill's sort of questioning the size of the elephant. What are we gonna communicate to them to give them a feel for that?
Well, it sounds to me like we're gonna work back and forth with them as we're doing the RFQs. As they're coming to us with their approach and their qualifications and their history and experience in doing it. And we kind of take that with our concept of pieces, then it's only a few so far, very limited, of what we've seen needs to be addressed. Those pieces we don't know need to be addressed yet unless somebody's written through and highlighted the general plan. That's just one person's opinion. We don't know what they all are until we have, you know, that, some of that may even come from the public group meetings and outreach. But if we do it in tandem with them giving us their qualifications and through the interview process, then that's how we start to shape the scope, and we can really refine the RFP at that point more so. But it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be a continual process of what needs to be addressed. As, you know, typically these things are almost, this connects to that, connects to this, and then but we really wanna do that, well, if you really wanna do that, then you have to change A, B, and C over here. So I think we're really young in the process to give a defined scope of what a consultant's gonna provide to us and a timeline of what they're gonna
Well,
have.
yeah, and it'd be very telling in the RFQ to ask them, you know, given, here's our existing 20-year-old plan. What's it gonna take to get, how much time is it gonna take us to get to the new one?
So that's
Yeah,
the free advice. That's the free advice.
Let that, well, of course it is, that's part of the free advice.
I mean, so I was looking back, this is the staff report from October. And, I think the original idea was that we were gonna meet and that we were gonna do an update. As the first, we were gonna piecemeal, right? We were gonna have the first one was gonna be, the circulation plan, and then we were just gonna do it in-house, that we were just gonna do it ourselves. And then maybe move on to the next one. But it seems that, that we've come to the conclusion that that's not practical, it's not gonna be the best work product that we want, and that now we're going back for a more holistic look. Is our recommendation to the city council is that we can't do it in-house and that we can't piecemeal it and that we are gonna have to go do a more larger global project? I mean, this is,
And I
these
think
are very different things.
the discovery is, you couldn't even do the circulation plan in-house by
Yeah, I don't.
There
Is
was
that
never,
ever-
there was never a
That was-
concept
that
of
was
doing
not
this
gonna
in-house.
be-
Yeah.
That was not gonna happen.
I mean, we budgeted $125,000 a year
Oh, yeah,
for
maybe
5
so.
years,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
for consultant.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's okay, this is where like a summary, the city maybe appointed its general plan update to review the current general plan and assess, okay, what changes are to be made to the element, and consider new legislation governing general plan updates in order to set the framework
Mhm.
and work program going forward. Okay, so that's, all right.
And there's some interesting different uses of words in here. I mean, there's
Yeah.
one place where it says update the general plan, another place where it says refresh the general plan.
Yeah,
And it's, you know,
let's do
I mean,
something.
I think we've each, in our different ways, come to the conclusions of what we think is the extent to which a general plan needs to be updated. I agree with Danny, there are some parts that, seem perfectly fine, but there are other parts that are like, really, really need updated. So,
absolutely.
the thing is that we're sort of we were tempted to go in with the presumption of knowing what we need.
Mhm.
And I want to come back to what I earlier said, was the scope needs to be what it needs to be, and we need to get some help in crafting that scope.
Mhm.
Because the scope isn't just, well, the worst situation is, okay, we've got $100,000, let's spend $100,000 on the general plan and see, well, that doesn't get anywhere, right? You've got to say, what do you need? And then eventually, how much is it going to cost?
Right.
And is there a way to spread it out? When we know that.
Mhm. Right. One important factor in the start of a general plan, and I'm remembering this, is that the approach when I did it in Sierra Madre was one of the first official documents was a technical background report. And that provided a snapshot of the city today. It even included some transportation generation numbers that exist today, where the impacts are, our general zoning and our land use, whether there are opportunities or constraints with our land use issues. That was a really good starting point to then get everyone to start thinking like, okay, where do we want to make change and where do we want to just stay the same, because it's perfect the way it is. But that really helped. And again, I think what this does is when we have a good consultant on board and us following along, obviously, and managing this process, is that we're shaping it as we move forward too. But all within a larger defined scope, if that makes sense.
And we're fundamentally shaping Sausalito's general plan, not Nevada, so.
Right.
Right.
This is not
somebody
a,
else's.
understand, this is not a boilerplate general plan.
Yeah,
It's
Bill,
not.
are you the chair?
Sure.
Who's the chair?
Do we have?
I don't think we have a chair.
Through the chair, I'd like to listen to this interesting discussion. May I say something?
Certainly.
You are struggling to figure out how to get started. I think one great help to the consultant, whoever it will become, would be if you apply yourself and check on the elements of the general plan and ask yourself in which areas your goals and policies may have broadened or changed. For example, tourism is something that we decided, let's handle tourism issues through the general plan. In the past, this was not an issue. Today, it's an issue. And that means whether it's the economic or fiscal element of the general plan could be focused on that as a source of critical or ancillary income to the city. And if you sit down in 3 meetings or 5 meetings and walk through the general plan and read goals and objectives, and you ask yourself which ones should be modified, you give the consultant a terrific help, because then you provide your own program. And then it becomes, then there's a chance that it becomes your plan. If they have to figure out what is,
No, I mean, I would,
Yeah, that's fine, I think, but that's what we do once we get our consultant on board. You don't do that.
will
in
you
order
do
to
it with
get
the
the
consultant?
Yeah, I
Or
would
you
think,
don't
I would
do-
actually insist on it.
yeah.
I would
Of course,
insist.
that's part of the process, that has to be part of the
Okay.
process. You know, and just in response to that,
Just-
the other part of the process is, what does this current batch of tourists cost us? In addition to what do we get from them?
I just thought that you could do that while the RFQ is floating in the community. You could do some homework and have the consultant provided with already the result of your.
That's possible. I guess my own feeling about that was that I would always argue that, and I, hate to pull out my favorite Sherlock Holmes quote, but theorizing in advance of the facts is a cardinal error because it inevitably biases the judgment.
See, you don't have to tell us that one, you could've just acted like it was yours. I would've known.
Yeah, we used to call it decision support systems. We'll create a system that supports the decision.
That's right, exactly, that's right. And that was my comment about the CEQA process as well.
Yeah.
I mean, those kinds of things are important to understanding what we're doing, not justifying what we're doing.
So,
So I think there
Excuse
is, I'm sorry. I mean, for my own little pet area of interest, I don't know how you can go into the process without knowing where the city gets its money from. We don't know our sources of revenue. We don't know who's watering our bread. We have some rough ideas, but we have theories. And to your point, we're not going into it with facts.
well, let me suggest this then. I think we're all consensus that we want an RFQ, right? And Danny, do you have an objection to working with Bill on that as
I think that's great.
as part of, and I have no,
Yeah.
objection. Yeah, so you guys.
I mean,
How do you feel
how
about
do you feel
What
about
is-
that?
yeah.
Do you want to take the first stab at it?
Do you wanna-
Or,
My other writing chores are gonna be winding down the next month, so that's
Great, so why don't you guys put an RFQ together and then just bring it to the city council,
okay.
right? Really?
probably
I
should
think
come
we're good.
back, I think we should come back to this subcommittee first. You know,
Nice.
I really do.
Okay.
I don't know about you, but it just seems to me that we ought to, that we're changing direction here and we probably ought to have one more little,
Okay.
because it's just so nice to see.
Do you see this as a shorter document, Bill, than what,
I do,
okay.
I do.
And, because I say it, and I wanna make sure you understand, like, I look at it as a little more generalized, but purposely done so that we're getting the interest of folks to look at it and go,
Well,
okay, I'm
but, you know,
interested.
I'm sure you can pull up some typical RFQs.
Right.
And so if we look at the typical RFQ, which does ask for specific things about their background and their past and what they're gonna do and so on and so forth, but with a section that is specific to our particular project here. And boiling down, you know, I think the notions or the concepts that you have listed down there could be looked at and restructured, and that would just simply be part of the RFQ saying, you know, we would like a response to these possibilities.
These possibilities, okay.
So are you going to the city council to ask them for permission to proceed in this process? Because there's no money involved, right?
Not at this point.
Not at this point.
So what are you going to city council to ask for? Just to inform?
I'll let Jill take that, but I think my understanding was that it's to inform, and it's also, I think, only, the council has to, like, don't they have to agree that we can, that the RFQ can go out? That the process concern has to be.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
And this also is, I mean, this is the beginning of the public's involvement. And so the city council is the first public meeting, and it's where it
Yeah.
it
So it's
should-
really about process.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
about process.
This is about, what we were tasked to do is to come up with a plan to move forward with regard to general plan update task force. That's what the task force was supposed to do. So
Okay.
we're going back to the city
Right.
council and saying,
This is our procedure.
we need to do an update, and we think the way
Right.
forward is to get, retain consultants. The first step in that is an RFQ. And here's the RFQ we've come up with. And then the city
And why
council-
we approach it this way.
Right.
Yeah,
And the direct answer to your question from my perspective is, because in parallel, there's a budget process going on.
Mhm.
And unless we start putting placeholders in the
Yeah,
budget that
exactly.
stick, that it's really gonna happen, it's not gonna happen. And so the budget's gotta be finished by June 30th, so there's got to be a presentation to the council about this during the budget process,
Carve out a little money.
so that we can, you know,
yeah.
make sure that that money is programmed in.
Mhm.
So,
And it's only gonna be estimates, and they're gonna be wrong,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Mhm.
How's it gonna go?
I have a question, about, you know, you mentioned a time frame, and it's important. We're at a critical point where it is timely. And, May 3rd is is it the next council meeting? Do we wanna have an update to the city council of where we are at this point? Or would we rather, draft an RFP, you know, and then, set a date a little bit later?
The latter,
Yeah, we can't, it's not,
Okay.
it's gonna be the 17th
yeah, it would be
at the earliest,
The earliest?
before you can get it on the city council.
anyway.
Okay. Because we then have to,
It's later, so there is a placeholder right now.
Yeah, on the
on
third?
May 17th,
On the third.
On the third?
Yeah.
on the 3rd there is,
So
yeah.
I think Danny's asking if you
Oh,
want,
you're right, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right, I'm sorry, my apologies.
I thought we were doing a public.
It's on the draft right now.
there's room for it right now.
It's just we won't have, I don't think, Bill,
Yeah, we
we'll
won't
have an
have-
RFP.
Yeah.
Because it needs to go out like this, like tomorrow.
Yeah, so it would be more of a, this is the direction that the task force has been going in. We're in the process of working on
It's
the
an
Well,
RFQ.
we could do
It's just a
that.
brief information session, is
Yeah,
what it really is.
we could do that, and then the city council could say, yeah, go forward with that plan, and then it doesn't matter what the RFQ is. I mean, you don't have to take that back to the city council, we just have to update where we're at and where we're going, and is everybody okay with that? And then,
You
and
still
then to
have to
raise.
get some numbers in.
Yeah, and then to Ray's point,
Right.
that's just part of the budget process, is trying to get an estimate in there.
Yeah.
How much is that gonna cost? What's that estimate gonna be?
For the RFQ or for the
RFQ's zero.
zero?
Sorry.
For the general plan update?
Yeah,
I
in the
gave a
first
range.
year, like in the first, you know.
Between
it-
500 and 700,000.
Yes, but year,
But for-
year
No.
one though, or year
Am
one?
I close?
In the first
Yes.
year?
No, no,
I'll-
overall.
I think the question was the first year.
No.
Yeah, in this two-year budget, what do we need to get in this, because we're gonna do
250.
RFQ, right? We're not even gonna get an estimate back for an RFP for,
Yeah, at least, for over the 2-year period, at least 250.
250.
Probably.
Mhm.
And you've been planning for that, right? 125.
Yeah, well, it's in the budget,
Yeah.
I mean, now, it's gotta make sure it survives the budget.
Yeah. So it's a pretty short update, but I'll indicate how many times we've met and what the, you know, the evolution of our meetings and where we're at. Does any committee member want to represent, this committee at the meeting or?
In what capacity?
Well,
you need a city council meeting?
yeah. 'cause
No, that's yours too.
That's all I wasn't getting out of it, but I wanted to share as well. Okay, I'm fine.
Well, you know, unless somebody wants to.
I mean, there's gonna be a legitimate question at the city council as to whether, well, there's two questions, whether we need to do this and whether we can afford to do this.
Right,
Right?
Exactly right.
And that should be, whether we can afford to do this shouldn't really be the purview of this meeting. Because that's the purpose of the city council. Whether we need to do it and how to do it and what, you know, over what time frame, that's really what this group needs to come up with.
Okay.
Right, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, you know, we can then let the city council, you know, argue it out as to whether
funds should be, resources should be allocated to this as opposed to something else.
So, I think I have direction. Any other comments or thoughts to share? Adam, do you have anything you wanna?
I'd like
Pass
to
out.
share information. I got impressed by the American Planning Association's publication, and I made it a point to purchase 12 copies of their latest publication for your interest. This is something that's a compilation of a national effort to make comprehensive planning more innovative and to incorporate action-oriented items in the general plan rather than just making a static document. And I thought this is what we want. So if you see in this one article that captures the imagination, I accomplished my goal. So I was always a little bit lukewarm about the APA, and this issue made me feel I want to call up the president of the American Institute of Planners to congratulate them that they are serving the community. So I had many years of experience in the field, and this is something I think was worth my effort to make them a call, give them a call, and send them a check to pay for this issue.
Thank you.
Do you want to give copies of this to everyone on the council, or
Excuse me?
do you want to give copies of this to everyone on the council?
I got for every council member and member of the planning commission, so when I see them,
Because I'm just an innocent bystander here, and I don't want to take a copy that should go to someone who is in a position
well,
of
you
authority.
should read it and give it to
Well, I was-
one of the council members.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm happy to, Adam, you know, as part of my report, I can make copies of that article as well. I can make copies of that article as a council
Great.
president, yeah.
In violation of the copyright.
What did I source it?
Some communities got sponsored. So they became the guinea pigs to try new ways of doing this. And they were sponsored by the APA. And we should be learning from them if we are not sponsored.
One would assume that the consultants are also reading this magazine.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So that's part
It'll
of,
show up in their
that's
qualifications.
part of why, yeah.
It's worth it to reach out to my colleagues in
Yeah.
California too, because I know that there's been some roundtable discussions from professionals in the field about the evolution of general plans, how complicated it's become, and this return to simplifying, making them much more user-friendly and much more direct.
Right, and there was some discussion at the
You
planning.
said it better than I did.
Yeah,
There was some discussion at the Planning Commissioners Academy that we went to
yes. It
a couple
shouldn't
months
be,
or so ago.
I mean, you know, it does require an effort, a lot of effort to really get the community's input and, you know, distill all that. But the end result, it should be a user-friendly and
Action-oriented.
action-oriented guide that we picked up often, you know, and read.
I think one of the things that is certain of our, you know, the more cynical person, including myself, who can be quite skeptical at times, are very concerned that we spend all this money and put all this effort to end up with a document that just goes on the shelf. And only gets looked at when you want to look up a policy to justify a particular action that you're taking from the dais. Right.
Yeah, and that.
And now it has that role.
It has that role.
It has that role, but, you know, we better have reached some sort of citywide consensus on tourism, ferries, parking, whatever, all the things I keep talking about through this process, or we wipe out there.
And at the risk of the citizens' participation fatigue that Adam mentioned, that risk is far less than the risk of not getting them involved early on.
And, you know, this approach to general plan too does, you know, general plans in 1995 didn't have, some did, but some didn't, actually have an implementation program as its appendix or right along with each of the elements. It sets an action plan that says, in year one of your adoption of your general plan, you're gonna explore this. And you're gonna create a committee to deal with this. And the city council is going to, you know, approve a plan for that. In year three, you've gotta vet that plan and then look at, you know, cause times will change and technology will change. But so it's not gonna be too definitive, but it's gonna say, you're gonna be accountable to addressing these things as we move, you know, in the years.
Well, that's a very different thing there. You said the word accountable.
Well,
How is it, I mean, there's nothing that prevents anybody from setting it on the shelf and ignoring all those calls for action, right? I mean, there's no consequence,
Mhm.
other than somebody may say, hey, you didn't do that. Right.
Right. It can happen.
It's not a piece of law that says you must, or there's consequence.
Well, it's unlike the housing element, where in fact it is a consequence if you don't get it approved. Because
still.
some developer will come in and say, you don't have a housing element, I'm gonna put up whatever I want.
But Russ, today, every decision that's made by the planning commission, and then sometimes before the city council, has a finding that says, say, it has to be consistent with the general plan.
That's right.
Right, but that's the earlier point, is you pull the book out, you make sure you're compliant, you put it back on the shelf. What you were describing, I think what Adam was suggesting, is something a little more proactive that says, as you were saying, you shall do this in year one. You shall create a committee that does X and
Right.
reports Y and blah-de-da.
Or
There's nothing that,
how
there's
to
no
fund
accountability
something.
associated with that.
How to fund something.
Can it be
should be
ignored, as you're asking? It could, but that's not what the
I'm
intent.
asserting it can be ignored,
Yeah.
I'm not asking. I'm trying to figure out where you got the word accountability.
I think it was just a, you know,
I mean,
I
it's
just,
a commitment by the city
it's a commitment.
Yeah.
to say, these are our priorities and this is
Right.
how we're going to accomplish them.
I mean, there's a,
I mean, the existing general plan calls for increasing the sales per square foot downtown. I'm sorry, no, increasing the sales per employee, which is an even weirder metric, but increasing the sales per employee, which we could do just by getting rid of some employees, who don't work for us anyway.
That's right.
But that's called for in the existing 20-year-old general plan. I doubt if there's anybody outside this room, since I just said it, who is aware of that. And yet, there was a call, a very specific call to action, right?
Yeah, and it was written in the economic element, which wasn't a required element anyhow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the point that Adam's making is that it's not supposed to just sit on the shelf. How do you turn it into a document that doesn't just sit on the shelf?
Maybe
It's kind of a rhetorical question, I'm trying to put some.
But yeah, and general plans now are done with an implementation program. I mean, that's the best I can answer in that general plans did not have that, and that's what, you know.
Would have to affect the zoning. For example, the zoning is a tool to affect the general plan.
Yeah, the zoning
If
is,
the moment you
zoning.
update the general plan, you have to update your zoning to reflect priorities shown in the general
Yeah,
plan.
the zoning ordinance has got to be consistent with the new general plan.
but are you suggesting that when the council ultimately, 3 years from now or whatever, adopts this general plan, that they have also adopted the action plan within it?
Yes.
And that they have an obligation therefore by resolution to,
I think that's the way you do it.
Mhm.
you actually have an implementation program, and you actually pass an ordinance and a
And that's why
resolution
too,
saying you're
that
implementing.
at the time in which we are looking at
Not
that,
only that, your annual capital improvements program reflects priorities, reflected.
and that's gonna be too a test of the feasibility and realistic, you know, actions that we are saying we're going to do.
That's right.
I mean, in Sierra Madre, when we dealt with that, we had to do some vetting and cleaning up and saying, there's only so much. While it was grand and we all had great ideas, let's be realistic and let's prioritize what we wanna do.
Okay, and then also to be realistic, we're talking about things that would become action plans in 2020 or 21.
Sure.
It's also a
I
question.
mean, this is not, this RFP will not be issued and approved, probably not in calendar 2016.
Could
I think the RFP can.
Should be.
Well, I think it should be.
Oh, yes.
There's no point putting this in the budget if we don't actually
No.
start this.
Yeah.
I think the RFP.
I said calendar, not fiscal. Well, fiscal
Yeah, no.
2016 ends.
Right, it's
Calendar year.
impossible to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Right. No, I would expect that you start the RFQ process, you just move as rapidly as you can
Yeah.
into an RFP process.
You gotta, the respondents need 60 days to respond,
Right.
they're not gonna
Yeah.
respond in 30 days.
We've done it in 30. We've done it in 30 days. These people are ready.
Right.
They are.
But it's interesting, though, that this question about any potential implementation plan is also one for the consultants.
Mhm.
What sort of experience have they had with that kind of, introduction into the general plan, which is not exactly necessary, I don't think, under the state law, but, I mean,
So that would work its way into your RFQ.
Okay.
Do we wanna talk about next meeting now? Or do we just wanna sit around the calendar?
Let's do that. Let's just at least pinpoint the week. Do that.
I guess, is the
Oh, well,
expectation
assuming-
that the
yeah.
next meeting would have the RFQ?
No, yeah, and assuming that, well, do we wanna wait till after the city council meeting next week before we go down this road?
I think you should do that.
Let's do that.
Wait until after city council.
Okay, and then
meeting,
Danny,
and then-
it's another
Okay.
thing.
Yeah.
And I would probably project out about a week or two following the city council meeting. So that's just next week. So
Mhm.
the week of May
Is that
16th.
okay?
Yeah. That this committee will meet
Mhm.
and review the RFQ. And we'll go from there.
Okay,
Okay.
sound good?
Motion to adjourn.
Week of
Second.
the
Second.
16th. Week of the 16th.
All in favor?
we're going.
Aye.
Week of the 16th. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, for our bonus, our bonus part of it.
Some bedside reading.
Yeah,
And
that's
Sausalito,
interesting, right?
you talked about